Welcome to my budget deck channel, where I try to make decks as cheap and playable as possible. So if this is something you're interested in, then why not subscribe? First of all, I want to say you can make this deck a bit cheaper by cutting certain cards, which I'll be going over right now. You don't have to run Shaddoll Construct if you don't want to. Construct is a very nice card, but the deck doesn't need it to function, but it complements the deck a lot, and it's a future investment if you ever want to play any other variants of Shaddolls, which there are plenty of. So I'd recommend running this card, but you don't need it. Winda is a card that you actually do need in this kind of deck. Shaky Naga, same, you don't really need it. You could run it, you could run Grista instead because of the fire engine, it still works in the deck. It's not too terrible from the effect either. Both of them kind of work sometimes, but not perfectly fine in this kind of setup. So yeah, you don't have to run either of them if you don't want to, but in a Shaddoll deck they usually do at least something, and you don't run out of Shaddoll fusions too much then as well. You don't have to run the Magistus super rare actually, because it's great, don't get me wrong, if you have it definitely put it in, but it doesn't really conflict with the strategy if you don't have it, because this deck tries to achieve something else, which is Utopia double OTK, which you do not have to run as well. You could run other rank 4s, but this is just a very, very good game finisher and very easy to pull off in this specific deck. So I'd recommend you run those two, but you do not have to. What you do have to run is sadly one of this one and one of this one. They are quite crucial to the whole Magistus playstyle, so I would at least run them at 1. Starting off with the main deck, one Shaddoll Falco. Do not have to run the card. You could go for a double Headshock if you prefer this kind of ratio. Headshock is very helpful in this deck, so if you feel like Falco is a bit too gimmicky sometimes, then Headshock is nice, but Falco can stall a bit more. Headshock just gives you stuff to fodder into your hand for things like Dynamiscus, for example, so Headshock is quite neat. Also searches your level 4 spellcasters, which will be important, and I will go over why that is in a second. One Ash Blossom, because most people have it. You obviously want to max out on stuff like hand traps. I'm telling you to play good cards. If you have good cards, you can swap out Forbidden Chalice for this. You can swap out Magistus 3G if you want to. You can swap out one Dynamiscus if you like to, and fill up this slot with hand traps that feel good for your playing needs, especially if you want to have something against the current meta, and if you know what that is, then put these cards in that you have. Impermanence, for example, is always a great card, and this deck doesn't rely on having spell cards or anything, so in the end it's fine. I would still recommend playing 2 Dynamiscus because of the discard effect for the Shaddoll monsters, because this is one of the cards that actually triggers it because it doesn't send for cost, so it's quite nice. One Wendy, because you do not really care about having multiple in your deck since it's a budget deck also, but also because you don't run Apcolone, so it doesn't really matter having none other ones with different attributes, because you don't really need it. Plus the Wind Fusion is terrible, so we're not even running that one. This card is very good to stall, and you can send it off Skomata, so at 1 is fine. Triple Skomata definitely can send off any kind of stuff, and it's a level 4 spellcaster, so run it at 3. Bit of a weird choice, but hear me out. Shaddoll Dragon also at 3, because level 4 spellcaster, can summon it out of the hand with Trismegistus, can get it back from the graveyard with Zorora, which is very, very good. Helps you facilitate rank 4s, can get them back for your fusion if you need material, so I would max out on this. You don't have to if you don't want to. If you feel like it doesn't do as much, get rid of one and possibly play stuff like Ariel, which is a good card, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't do as much for the deck as it would in other variants. I ran one Nefarious Archfiend, Eater of Nefariousness, what a handful of name, which facilitates you going into Shaky Naga, but also this card can pop your own Shaddoll cards, trigger the effects, and it can pop Winda, so you can go off into the Utopia double OTK after your opponent's turn, which can be very strong from time to time. It's genuinely like not a bad card, but it's one of the cards you could swap out if you do not like it, and if you don't want to play Shaky Naga, then there's not much of a reason to run it, besides the fact you can special summon it out of your hand if you control a spellcaster, which you will have a lot of the time. So it does stuff in hand and in the graveyard and in deck, so I felt like this card would be a cheeky inclusion in the playstyle. Crowley is a card that also helps you going into rank 4s, which this deck quite needs actually, and it is somewhat fun that you can change its attribute. It's kind of meant to be for invoked, I think, but it also works for Stalls. So this card at 3 definitely works, but I think technically you could cut it down to 1 or 2, because you can search it out quite easily, and it doesn't start your Magistus combos as much as the other ones do. So technically run it at your own discretion, the ratios, but I felt like 3 actually worked best. Sadly, with the discard effect, you do not trigger the Shaddoll effects. This would be massively stronger, but sadly you do not, because it is 4 cost. Zoroa is a very good card, starts your plays-ish. It searches out stuff, it can get you Crowley to your hand, and from then onwards you can do more stuff. Also, when the game progresses, you can use this card to go into rank 4s, which the Utopia double OTK says thank you. And in general, this is a very good card. It's a tuner monster, so it facilitates any kind of level 8 synchro shenanigans you want to be going for as well. The mummy of the deck, basically the young version of Madame Vere, is a very good card in the deck, because summoning it off of her, well, I want to say Xyz's counterpiece is quite nice. Plus, it searches you a fusion, which is very helpful for the whole Shaddoll plan. It's a light monster, so it works with construct. Overall, it is actually quite nice. The second effect of returning one banished spellcaster can come in handy. If Zoroa wouldn't negate the effects, this card would be a lot better as well. But sadly, this monster that Zoroa summons back has its effects negated, so you can't really do that kind of shenanigans. But the card itself isn't too bad either. With triple Endymion, you could run multiple in form of spell power mastery, but I felt like in a budget version that wasn't really necessary. Plus 3 is genuinely enough, especially in this variant. There is something you can do with this card because it's type water. You can mix the deck with Gigabytes, for example, and then go for things like Bahamut Shark into Totally Awesome. It's one play that a lot of players, I think, would do in a pure Magistus variant. You don't really need it in this, especially since it's not very budget with 2 ultra rares, so I decided not to go for it. This card also starts your plays, also as a draw engine. You can tuck cards from your hand back into the deck, which gets rid of certain garnets that you can have, especially with Shaddoll, so that can be quite helpful from time to time, but also with double or nothing, that could save you from time to time as well. Shaddoll Beast, very well, it's your draw engine of the deck, which sounds stupid, but it is. You technically could play Paw of Desires, but I didn't want to include it. Triple super rare. Plus, sometimes you don't want to banish certain cards, but if you have 1 or 2, you can definitely splash them in at your discretion. Monster Reborn, a very good card in the deck, because you have discards, you have fusions, so you can get stuff to the graveyard, you have a lot of things that you can summon back out with it, so I would definitely run it if you don't have any other card you want to replace it with. It's a good extender, but it's not necessary. Shaddoll Fusion, good card, but not perfect card. First of all, your opponent can ash it. If you want to circumvent this, play triple El Shaddoll Fusion. This card just makes it a lot better actually playing going second. So you can summon it from your deck, which obviously this is a massive boost in terms of the materials you have to use. So I prefer Shaddoll Fusion, but it also has the problem, well, both with Shaddoll Fusions too, that you can only summon a Shaddoll monster. It's not as generic as Magistus Invocation or the real Invocation is, so this is a bit problematic from time to time if you start with it and you don't have a Shaddoll in hand, because you obviously have no way of searching a Shaddoll as well. It is what it is, but I still like it in this deck. You don't have to play it. I will probably make a pure Magistus deck profile at one point because I really like it, but for now I actually do like the Shaddoll Fusion in here. Triple Invocation, could cut it down to 2 if you like, but this card actually comes in very handy because you can easily go into Winda a lot of the time. With Invocation, you can easily search it out, and it goes into the Magistus Fusion monster as well. You can even use your Shaddoll monsters for it, which is very helpful because you can trigger their effects then and they're not dead in hand. So triple this actually helps because your Fusion Magistus monster is somewhat of a disruption, so it is actually fine. Tris Magistus at 1, you could run it at 2 or 3 if you like, but you don't really want to see more than 1. You can search it, and sometimes it's still a dead card because you don't want to use the effect, or you don't really have another monster to use the effect on. In a pure variant, bumping the numbers of this card up would be more understandable. In this version, you don't really need it, I feel, but you could run more and just cut this card, for example, or any other card like Monster Reborn if you like. Forbidden Chalice, just a very good card going first and going second, disrupt your opponent, and that's what you mainly want to be doing, but hand traps are obviously most of the time better than this. Double or Nothing, a card that you need for the OTK. Thurgy is a card that could start your plays if you, for example, start with Crowley or even with Rilliona. So you have this kind of problem if you don't, and if you don't have a Magistus monster in hand, which can happen sometimes, then this card is kind of dead, so you don't have to play it. But also the effect at the end is kind of funny because you could attach one of your Shaddoll monsters to one of the monsters, but you'd already need a graveyard set up with this, so it's not too good actually. But there's quite a few things that you could equip to your monsters that would be somewhat memeable. Well, that's not why you play this card in the first place. Dynamicus, very good of disruption for your opponent, but also very good in discarding your Shaddolls and actually getting effects off. So this card does multiple things at once. For the extra deck of the Shaddolls, Winda can be a game winner by itself. Make sure you summon this card in the extra monster zone so you can get rid of it with Gravity Controller. I sometimes forget, and that can be problematic then if you want to OTK your opponent, but wait, you can only special summon once per turn. That is problematic. One construct because it's genuinely a good card. Double this card because you can equip them as well, and the attack boost, especially on stuff like Winda, can actually be quite funny from time to time because you can take over your own monsters with it and then technically boost Winda by 1000 attack and defense, which makes it a lot harder to get over by. So I would run 2, especially since you run triple invocation as well. I find it good at 2, but you don't have to if you don't want to. The water Shaddoll isn't all terrible. It does certain things against certain decks, not too many, but you know, I think Drytron or something wouldn't be too happy running into this specific one. Shikanaga card you don't have to run, but it does stuff sometimes. Same for the Synchro. Nuking your opponent's board can actually be quite nice, and the effect of being equipped isn't too bad either. OTK is an OTK. Why wouldn't you play it in a rank 4 deck unless you don't have the materials for it? This card is okay. It can recycle your Shaddolls, I think, if I'm not mistaken, because I think it's just a spellcaster. So this came up like I think one time. It's not very good, but you can attack twice on at least monsters, so this is this kind of restriction, and it's spell trap removal if you use it as an equip, so it's nice, and you can go into it with your Shaddolls as well because it's only spellcasters that you need. So I would definitely run it at 1, could run it at 2 like I do, but you don't necessarily have to. But since it's a rare, if you don't have anything else to run it at 2. If not, then you could cut one of these. Definitely play one of them. Still not sure if the monster on the card is actually the wardrobe, like the clothing, or if it's the person in it, because I don't think it is. I think it's the clothing, which is a bit funny. But this card can start loads of your combos, and you have to watch though, because you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn except Magistus monsters. So if you think you can search Invocation and then go into Winda, for example, that you cannot. It's very good going second as well as an equip because you can negate one of your opponent's monsters, so this is great. Gravity Controller, basically just getting rid of your Shaddoll monsters and triggering their effects. Artemis is a card that is mainly used to equip one of your monsters with, then search one monster, and you can do this as many times as you want by equipping stuff from the graveyard with cards like I think Crowley has the effect and Reliona have the effect that you can equip stuff from the graveyard, which is very neat. And then another card, sometimes you want a high rating link monster. Raster Liger is the free link 4, but you can obviously go for stuff like Appaloosa, all kinds of OTK material, Boral Sword comes to mind, and so on. There's no limits to this one. Cards you could also run Instant Fusion or Ready Fusion. You can go into the Camion Wizard, for example, or even into Invoked Kaliga, and use them for like rank 4 plays and whatnots. You could run a small Alistair Invoked engine in this deck, cutting certain cards because this card is also level 4 Dark Spellcaster monster, so it synergizes a lot with the deck, and the fusions work quite well with Magistus as well. So this is an engine that you could consider. Other than that, Magistus Vitra, whatever you call it, the Revive Monster Reborn from Magistus Monsters isn't terrible. Could run it, but I didn't feel like in a non-pure variant it made much sense because it's quite specific in what it does. So wouldn't recommend it, but you could play it if you like. Hope you enjoyed the deck profile. Leave a like, comment, subscribe, but most importantly, hope you have a good day.